The state of the UK prison system at the moment. So that's what I'm going to be talking about in this episode, people, because a lot of people have been asking us a range of different questions, and I have had a lot of press in touch lately asking different questions on prison and what it's like at the moment. So currently I've been out of prison for 4 years now, but it seems as though the place, or HMP, is deteriorating rapidly in them 4 years. It was rapidly deteriorating over the years anyways. It is an absolute shithole, to put it bluntly. But at the moment, with the way things are going, the country's on its arse, the prison system's on its arse, and it's at boiling point. It's like an absolute powder keg waiting to explode. They're overcrowded, they're underfunded, understaffed, and they're ram-packed full of anything you can get your hands on. Narcotics, everything is in the system at the minute. And this is not something new. Over the years, it's always been the same with the majority of prisons. But at the moment, with the overcrowding crisis, and with them being understaffed in the majority of prisons, you can now imagine what the places are like, to be honest. Now, I have got first-hand experience, and I have got first-hand information from prisoners who are in there now serving time. I've got lads that ring us up from inside and keep us informed and tell us exactly what's going on inside prison. One of my pals has been in 20 odd years, he's got another 10 years left, and he still rings us up and he keeps us updated on what's happening inside the prisons. So there is two ends of the spectrum. This is how I'll describe it. So you've got the lifers, the IPPs. Then you've got the determinate sentence prisoners. Now the determinate lads and lasses and youngsters, because we're talking about YOs as well, ladies, if that's what you can call them. So the women, the men and the YOs, you've got determinate sentence prisoners who have got a release date. Then you've got your lifers, your IPPs, your two strikes and your discretionary lifers who have got to wait for a parole board, and they have to show that they're progressing through the system and doing something positive. But how can you do that when the system is so rammed? There's no courses, or there is courses, but because of the understaffed, because of the lockdown regime, which, believe it or not, is still going on, even though it's nothing to do with the COVID now, the lockdown regime that's happening now is because of the prison crisis, the overcrowding and the understaffed. So you've got the lifers who have got to progress through the system, but they can't progress because of the state of the prisons. Now, these are the ones that are feeling the brunt of it. These are the ones that can't be arsed with all the drugs and everything and all the violence and everything that's happening on the wings when the prisons are in uproar and they're supposed to behave themselves and not get involved in any of it. In amongst all this fucking shit that's going on, the boredom can get a hold of you sometimes, and you might be sitting in a pad with a few lads and they offer you a bit of hooch. You get pissed up, you lose your inhibitions, you say something, or the screws know you're pissed, you get wrote up, and you're fucked. You come for your parole, you get a knockback. So with the system being on its arse, you've got the lifers that are hating it at the moment. Then you've got the determinate sentence prisoners who have got a release date, so it doesn't matter what they do as long as they don't get extra time added on. Nothing more can happen to them. So these are the ones that are loving it at the moment. Because if you're in there and you want to make a bit of money, there's loads of money to be made inside the system at the minute. You can go in there, or the ones that are in there rather, can be making an absolute fortune off the stuff that's in there or what they're getting sent in. Now, it's no secret with all these drones that are coming in and out. There was an inspection in HMP Golf, an unannounced inspection, a couple of months back. It was all over the papers. It was on the BBC News as well. Not that we'll believe much about the BBC News, but it was on there as well. And there was a report on talking about when the inspectors were in the prison. They said it was like an airport. I mean, over exaggerating, but what they meant by that was, as the inspectors were walking around on this unannounced inspection, drones were buzzing over the top of them, coming to deliver packages into the prison. Now, the prison has got cages on the windows, so you can't open your window fully, or they've got the vents on, so there's no way of opening your windows. The windows don't open anymore. Or the ones that do have got cages on, so you can't get your arm out. But the lads have been putting big holes in the window, because it's just like hardened perspex plastic. So they're smashing big holes into them, putting their arms out, getting the packages off the drones. So when the inspectors are walking around, they've been seeing these big gaping holes and wondering what they were. Then they've seen the drones coming in, put two and two together. So there's been a bit of a clampdown in that prison, trying to get the prison back to the way they wanted, run by the prison service. So they're determined, lads, who've got a release date. They're loving it, because you've got the ones that are getting off their heads, then you've got the ones that are supplying it, making a fortune. So obviously the criminals, they're in there as a punishment. They can't make it out on the outside, well, not supposedly. So they're making money on the inside, and like I've just said, they're making an absolute fortune. But the lifers that want to progress are having to see all this going on in front of them, people getting off their nuts on a regular basis. And imagine you're a lifer or an IPP, you've got to be squeaky clean. But you haven't just got to deal with yourself and your own thoughts, your own messed up head of being in prison, dealing with everything that's going on. You've then got to deal with another 50 plus lads on the wing, depending on how big the wing is. Sometimes there's 100 lads on the wing. So you've then got to deal with not only yourself, but all these other people. And you're not supposed to react. So say someone's off the nut and they start fucking on, or someone's pissed up out their heads and they're wanting to fight, or they bump into you and they start causing a bit of aggro, you're supposed to just walk away from it. A normal, determinate sentence prisoner would have it right out, put it right on them, batter them, get stuck in, have a fight, or seriously injure them or hurt them for the way they've just fucked on with you in prison. Because that's what happens. You can't get disrespected, or you will be fucking treated like shit. So you've got to stand up for yourself. But if you're an IPP or a lifer, that's not allowed, supposedly. If you get caught doing that, even though it wasn't your fault, then you get a 2-year knockback. So it's an ongoing vicious circle, vicious cycle, but you are stuck in the middle of, and there's nothing you can do if you're an IPP or a lifer. You've got to live that fucking nightmare, waiting for your chance of parole, and you've got to say or make sure that you've been squeaky clean, you had no altercations on the wing, you've had no arguments with the screws, you've had no altercations with any of the prisoners, you've had no nickings. So imagine how hard that is, and I know how hard it is because I was living it just a few years ago. When I was back in on my recall IPP, got into a few bits of altercations, nothing that got nickings or wrote up for, but it could have quite easily escalated. It could have turned bad really quick if I didn't use my head and keep me mind or keep myself cool in these type of situations. Because when I was in home house on a recall, I was with a bunch of lads who I was having it with on the wing. Having it with means the ones that you've got to click with, who you knock around with. And one night they decided they were all going to get smashed on the hooch, a few of the bits and pieces. But I had a hearing coming up. I was in on an IPP recall. That's a fucking big no-no for me. But you think to yourself, like, how do you deal with situations like this? Obviously, I've still sat with them when they were drinking. And with me being the only one in the pad sober, or the only one out on the landing, you can see everything going on. You can see everything brewing. And I just knew from being on a straight head and looking what was going to happen, because I've been in this situation and that scenario dozens of times over the years. Sometimes I've been involved in it, more so when I was in HMP Franklin, because we used to get pissed up on a regular basis in there and get smashed at Christmas time and have parties. But I didn't give a fuck back then, because I was only in my early 20s. Now I'm in my late 30s, married with 4 kids at home. I wanted to be back out on the streets. I wanted to be back home, rather, not on the streets. I wanted to be back home with me family. So that split second, I could have just said, right, I'll get on the hooch with the lads, but guess what? They all got nicked that same day. Because like I said, I could see things escalating. Things were brewing on the wing. Not just the hooch, by the way. And you could just see two groups of lads. Some of them, some southern lads, Cockneys. One of them was from Nottingham, Coventry rather. And you could just see what was about to happen. They started mouthing on, immature, pissed up on the drink. The group of lads I was with, doing the same thing, and I just thought, here we go. And it kicked off. Punches were getting chucked all over. Screws came bolting down. A few of the lads got banged up behind the door. Then me and another lad left on the landing, me pal Thomas. We were out on the landing, both IPPs. And a couple of these lads were still mouthing on, and we were the only ones out. So they came up the landing, came walking down towards us, mouthing on. Obviously, we're IPP. These are both determinate sentence prisoners who've got a release date there. They know when they're getting out. And one of them, who wasn't even involved with them, come up with his hands down his pants, had a chirp down his pants, started getting closer to us. Then I lost my mind, lost my fucking head, started shouting at him, just about to smash his face in. But luckily, he seen how fucking mad I was getting, and he walked off the landing, left the landing. Everyone was coming out saying, Ricky, how you calm down, leave it, it's not worth it. They're all at me backs, and you're always IPP, and this little fucking runt from down London was just coming up wanting some grief with his hands down his pants, a little batty boy, thinking he was fucking hard. But a bit of when you show a bit of force like you're not scared, fucking shouting down at them, he shot back down. But that situation there, weeks and months before my parole hearing, I wouldn't be sitting here now, I'd probably be sitting still inside. Because if I did let loose and start smashing them, then if again, there's cameras all over, I would have been the one that was fucking nicked, charged, whatever. Still sitting in there now for what? For a bunch of lads that were getting pissed up who would have been released, and I would have been sat sitting in there. Now that's the situations that's happening on a daily basis that these lads have got to deal with and put up with, these lifers and IPPs. The determinate sentence lads didn't give a shit because they've got a release date and they're not bothered about IPPs or lifers, they're just bothered about themselves. So that is what I meant by two different ends of the spectrum. You've got the ones that have got release dates and the ones that haven't. So for the ones that have got release dates, as you've heard people say before, it's a holiday camp. They're getting off the nuts, they're making a fortune, while the IPPs and the lifers are suffering. Now the IPPs came out almost 20 years ago now, and there's still lads sitting in there. But a lot of time people have asked us, well, how come they can still be sitting in there? Some of them had 12-month tariffs, 6 months, believe it or not. One of them who had a 6-month tariff, I think he's been in one of the longest, being 19, coming up 20 years inside a prison on a 6-month tariff. Now, people have said, well, how come he's still inside? It's his own fucking fault. It's not, it's his own fault as in the behaviour. But when you understand what's going on in there and the IPPs and the lads, the majority of them that's got them, and the lasses, because there is a load of lasses that got them as well, can't physically and emotionally control themselves. They've got mental health issues. So imagine being on a wing with 100 other people, about 80% of them have got mental health problems, running around lunatics. And if they haven't got mental health problems, they're off their nuts, which is causing mental health problems. And you're supposed to be a model prisoner, a role model prisoner, just because you're serving that sentence. Now, some of them that's been in coming up 20 years did have mental health problems before they went in, which didn't get diagnosed. And imagine an IPP prisoner with an ADHD or autism. It doesn't come into play when they come up for parole that they've got these conditions. What does come into play is the fact that they've messed around on the wing. Someone said something to them. They've reacted because that's how they react. It's how they respond to situations. Because they can't physically cope in them situations. They feel like they're getting targeted sometimes. So they're trying to show a bit of aggression so that it doesn't happen in future. And these are the scenarios. And they come up for parole boards and they keep getting knocked back. So then they turn to drugs inside a prison to cope with this torment and torture that they're going through. So what happens when they come up for parole again? They've had a piss test. They've had a negative piss test. Sorry, a positive piss test for whatever drug they've been taking whilst in there, and they get another knockback. And this is ongoing 20 years later, believe it or not. I count myself as one of the lucky ones because I had my head screwed on. I know how to handle myself and I know how to handle these situations. But you get lads that can't handle themselves and can't handle them situations, and they're just getting treated like shit, not getting any help whatsoever, and they're still stuck in the system now. And that's why the UK prison system is an absolute fucking mess. They can't even get on the courses because of the overcrowding. So how are they supposed to show that they're rehabilitated and the progress and they've acted in a positive manner when you've got all of this ongoing? This inhumane sentence was abolished in 2012 and it's still ongoing now. That should have been abolished retrospectively across the board, and then people should have been resentenced. Because even though I say this a lot on here, and you know, the ones who have been following my channel, when I talk a lot about the bacons and the bacon bashers, a lot of bacons are on IPP. So you couldn't just let these bacons back out onto the street because they are a danger to kids. And nothing is worth that, letting these horrible creatures out to attack youngsters. That is what's made it tricky for the rest of the IPPs, and that is why they haven't been overturned completely. But that is another topic for another day, the IPPs, where I will go more into depth. And the ones who have been following my channel, I'm here the social media pages. I am in the process of making a documentary on the IPPs, and I am getting as many family members, IPP prisoners, ex-prisoners, professionals, all involved. So if you all want to get involved in that, drop us an email or DM us on one of my socials and you can be involved. I'm just going to get a few minute clip of each and every person that wants to be involved, and I'm going to talk about the IPPs in depth and share everybody's stories and get it out and widespread as much as possible to let everyone know what's going on with the IPPs, because there's still over 3,000 in prison serving an IPP sentence, where thousands of these could be released back onto the streets, back into hostels or homes to get rehoused and be living out here and getting on with their lives and putting that absolute nightmare of a sentence behind them. Now, when people have asked me thoughts, like I've just mentioned there, about the IPP as well, if it was used for what it was designed for and kept it for the bacons, the nonsense, then it would have worked. They deserve that sentence because they need to be looked at constantly to make sure that they're not harming kids. Because someone who commits what you would class as normal offences, where it's not S offence, how can you put them in the same category as bacons? Someone like myself who committed violence against other like-minded lads, not innocent people in the street, no innocent victims, people who were like-minded, who were like me, who had been in trouble. So someone like myself who's committed violent acts against other violent men, how can you put that in the same category as someone who has harmed a child by sex? It's not even, it's rape. I'll not say it on here because it'll flag up. It's not even that sound. I shouldn't have even used that term sex because it's not sex. It's fucking grape. What they do to these kids, these bacons, what they've done. It's not consent. It's forcefully taken from them for the rest of their lives. How can you put them in the same category as a violent person who's committed violent acts against another violent male, or someone who went into, just say, for instance, a shop or a post office or a bank and robbed it? That is not the same as robbing a child of their innocence. There's a total difference. So there should be different sentences for them. They get lesser sentences than what normal criminals do. They should have been kept. The IPP, if it was kept for them, it would have worked in my eyes, because these beasts need to be kept on something for the rest of their lives, because they cannot be rehabilitated. You can't change the mindset of a beast, a bacon, someone whose preference is little ones. You cannot change or rehabilitate them. I don't care what you say. They aren't wired up like we are. Like a straight man fancies women, these predators fancy kids. So how can you change that? It's like saying to me, or a straight man, don't fancy women. Obviously I'm married, so I won't fancy any women. But it's like saying to a straight man, you no longer fancy women. If you fancy women, if you're attracted to women, we'll put you in prison. It just isn't possible. So how can you tell them to not be attracted to little ones? That's what they like. So you cannot change that. You can't rehabilitate these monsters. So they should not have had the same sentence as people like myself. It's two totally different offenders. So it should have totally different sentences. And that is the IPP, imprisonment for public protection. It should have been imprisonment for the minors' protection. That's what they should have brought out for them. But getting back to the UK prison system being on its arse, if they let some of these lads out who are on IPP, and the lasses who deserve to be back out here, who have been in prison over 10 years after the tariff expired, some people's sentences would have been over 10, 15, 18 years ago. But because they've took drugs in prison, or because they've had fights, or because they've had disagreements with screws and just said, fuck yous, I'm not doing the courses, and just being stubborn, their own stubbornness has kept them in all that time. But the IPPs, or the IPP sentence, fucked the system up as well. Get rid of them, get them out, then the system will start working better. But do the government really want the system to work better? Do the government want the prisons empty? Of course not, because loads of people will be out of jobs. It's a money-making scheme. Prison is a business. It's the designing it to be the way it is. My pal even said that the screws, it seems as though sometimes they're wanting trouble, because on a daily basis in the prisons at the moment, the screws are getting done in. They're getting banged out. They're getting slashed. They're getting seriously injured. Not that they're trying to do this on purpose, but what I mean by this is, it's like they're causing tensions on the wing and they're wanting trouble, so that they've got an excuse to keep them banged up longer behind the doors during the day to make the job easier for them. So that is what's happening on that side of it with the screws and that as well. Like, they can't be asked to do what they've got to do the job, basically. Running around the wing, chasing after the lads, answering bells, constantly all day long. They just want the easiest time possible whilst they're in there. And the easiest time for them is when the prisoners are behind the doors. So, as you can imagine, that's what they want. So there is cases and scenarios where they'll just purposely let things happen so that everyone gets banged up and it's easier for them. But that is how the UK prison system is on its arse at the moment. The screws, the governors, they don't really give a shit. They're in there to do a job, to make money, and they're not arsed. And like I said, if more people were rehabilitated and there wasn't as many people going in, it wouldn't be so much of a money-making scheme. The government wouldn't be making as much money, and neither would these private prisons. Look at the private prisons. These private prisons are on the arses as well. But the private prisons are actually making a fortune out of the prisoners and giving them pennies. They're making the prisoners work to obviously make different items or whatever, depends on which prison it is and what that prison is run for. Yeah, because like I say, the private prisons is a money-making scheme. It's a business to make money for them. It's not for the prisoners' needs. It's for their needs to make money. So again, how can you privatise a prison to turn it into a fucking factory and make the lads graft all day for fucking peanuts when the prisons are just running just as bad? The private nicks are even worse than the government-run prisons. So the private prisons have got more screws that have come in without prior knowledge of the job. They've just come straight in off the streets. They've had no prior training. They're chucked in, and this is why when you're seeing a lot of these screws are banging the inmates, it's more so in the private prisons, because these young female screws coming in, 20, 21-year-old, surrounded by big-time gangsters, and they get swiped off the feet. They come into that job as a last resort because they've got no money. Some of them have come from the likes of McDonald's, have been offered a bit extra money, went into the prison system, bumped into some big hardened criminals who've flattered them, offered them a bit of money, offered them or shown them a bit of love and affection, and they fell for it. So then they're bringing stuff in for them, and they're getting banged all over in the pads off the lads, and they're loving it. So that is why that's happening a lot more often, because there's that many of them coming in off the streets or off other jobs. They haven't been trained properly, they don't know what they're doing, and they're getting, another instance I'll tell you about in prison, when a female officer comes on the wing. She's new on the wing, doesn't really know the job role much. Obviously she's got another officer who's walking her around, showing her the ropes, and a lot of the lads start wolf whistling at her, fucking giving her the whistle. Oi, oi, how you doing? And then she's like blushing, going a bit red, but also underneath loving the attention. Now some of them are not the prettiest, I'll just put it kindly, I'll not be nasty. I'll say some of them aren't the prettiest that come in, where they might not get second glances in the street, but in prison, just about every inmate is glancing at them because they haven't had it for months and years on end, and the horny is out, and they see a new screw or a new bit of meat on the wing, and the wolf whistling and saying, well, hey, gives a bit of that. And underneath she's loving it, and then the prisoners act upon it, and that's how the romance inside a prison starts. And like I've also mentioned, they went in there to get extra money from another job to boost their income. It still isn't enough. Then they get offered an extra 500 to £1,000 a week on top if they bring a couple of phones in, then a couple of packages, and that's how it spirals out of control, and that's how they get them. Then obviously once they've done it a couple of times, they keep doing it more often, and near the screws, they're talking about it, they might talking about it to the friends or whatever, and they'll think, oh fucking hell, I wouldn't mind doing that. Then they're all doing it. More so in the private prisons, and that's why the prisons are rammed full of drugs and phones, because if the drones aren't dropping them in, the screws are. How do you think during lockdown, when no one was out, everyone was locked down outside of here, the prisons were all locked down, there was no contact, so you would have thought then the prisons would have dried up, but guess what? The prisons were rammed. The prisoners were off the nuts all through COVID. Well, a lot of them were. Just like a lot of people out here in the community were getting pissed and off the nuts because there was nothing else to do. The prisoners were doing it, but how did they get it in? There was no drones. There was no visits. Leaves it to your imagination. But I've covered quite a lot in this video there. A few people have been asking us, like I say, the press have been in touch asking us these questions, and I have had someone in touch from a documentary asking a lot of questions, so I might be doing a bit filming later in the year for a couple of documentaries talking exactly like I've just spoke about on here. But why watch documentaries when you can watch this channel? Find out first-hand knowledge and information what's going on inside the prisoners. And like I've said, there's a couple of people, more so some of the news people that's on my channel, saying, how do you know all this? Where do you get your stories? Where do you get this? Obviously a lot of stories are from when I was inside myself. I've got people that ring us from in the prisons, on the prison phones that is, not on the burners. And yeah, so I get information off of them to tell us what's going on. And I do also get a lot of emails on a daily basis from people working inside the prisons who want to let us know what's going on. So I get it from both ends. Get it from people working in the prisons, and I get it from the prisoners. So the majority of things that I spoke about on this channel are first-hand information. I was going to say knowledge there. First-hand information. And the other information that I do get, obviously from when I do stories on Bacons and different things, I do have a look at court cases, then go in. If you go on Google, you can type in court cases, and you can have a look at the judges summing up and different things like that, so you get the proper information and you didn't talk shite, which a lot of channels do. You get the first-hand proper facts on here, people. So I'm going to leave that one there for now, people. Hopefully you are still enjoying the content. And if you're still watching up till now, I'm sure you are. But double check that you are subscribed. And if you're not, hit that button, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. Take care, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.